Let's face it, sharing family legends and trying to solve family mysteries is what makes genealogy so intriguing. One of my family legends was that someone in the family line had done something very important with the Queen's horses. If you listen to my first episode, you'll know we're close to solving just who that was. Let's recap. I have in my possession this photo of my great-grandfather, Robert Upson Hiscox. I know it's him because on the back it says, Robert Hiscox, Dad's dad. This photo came from a binder that belonged to my aunt, whose dad was also named Robert Hiscox. But he had thick auburn locks. Clearly not the same guy. I found this photograph on Ancestry, which shows the exact same photo of Robert with his father, Henry William Hiscox, and his 3 brothers. Now, the when, why, and how these guys were all in one place to have this photo taken is a conundrum we'll solve later. For now, I just want to thank the original poster of this photo, who gave me permission to use it in this video. The same poster also shared this photo, which includes 4 generations of the family, one of which is a much younger Henry William Hiscox, along with his father, Henry Charles Hiscox. And as we learned in the last episode, there is a Henry Charles Hiscox who worked at Buckingham Palace as the messenger in the Master of the Horse Department. So how do I prove that my Henry Charles Hiscox is the Buckingham Palace Henry Charles Hiscox? Here's what we don't do. We won't go just look up Henry Charles Hiscox and try to make a path going forward in time to Robert. We will follow Robert's path backwards in time to Henry Charles. We go from the known to the unknown. In addition to the legend of the horse guy, I knew that Robert Upson Hiscox emigrated to the U.S. through Ellis Island. So let's talk about that. Ellis Island opened for immigrants on January 1st, 1892. 12 million immigrants passed through this golden door to the New World until November of 1954. Few people talk about Castle Garden, but it served as New York's main immigrant processing center from 1855 to 1890. In the spring of 1890, the U.S. government took over immigration processing as the job had gotten quite large for the state of New York. 70% of the nation's immigrants entered the country through New York. Processing moved to the U.S. Barge Office in Lower Manhattan from 1890 to 1891, then moved to a new Ellis Island facility on January 1st, 1892. Unfortunately, a fire broke out on Ellis Island on June 15th, 1897. Immigrant processing returned to the barge office until December 17, 1900, when processing went back to a new brick facility on Ellis Island. Tragically, passenger arrival records at Castle Garden, 1855 to 1890, the barge office, 1890 to 1891, and Ellis Island, 1892 to 1897, were all lost in the fire. That's 42 years of passenger arrivals into New York. How loud that room must have been, the chatter of the world's languages, crying babies, restless children. About 150,000 seekers of freedom were sent back to their home countries, and 3,500 people died there, waiting out illnesses that prevented them from continuing their journey into the United States. Robert Upson Hiscox and his records survived Ellis Island. Robert arrived at Ellis Island on November 23, 1902, on a ship named the Etruria, which sailed from Liverpool on November 15th. He's 24 years old, he's single, and he says that he's a farmer. He can read and write, and his nationality is English, and his last residence was Holywell. Immigrants were asked several questions to determine their financial status. Those viewed unable to support themselves would be refused entry into the country. Robert states that his final destination is Lewis, Iowa, and when asked whether he has a ticket there, he says both yes and no. It is then crossed off. Train tickets were available for purchase at Ellis Island. In fact, he may have been required to purchase it before he was allowed to leave. Robert paid his own passage to the U.S., and when asked if he had more than $30, it is recorded that he has $50, which in 2023 dollars is slightly more than $1,750. He also indicates that he has never been to the U.S. before. Immigrants were specifically asked if they were going to see a relative, and Robert discloses that his brother, Edwin Hiscox, lives in Lewis, Cass County, Iowa. Robert has never resided in the poorhouse, does not practice polygamy, nor is he under a contract to labor in the U.S. His mental and physical health are marked as good, and he is not deformed or crippled. There'll be more episodes about Robert's life in Iowa. There's so much to tell. But for now, it is time to fill in the leaves, so to speak, so the branches of the family tree are correct as we go back in time. We'll do that by determining the names of Robert's siblings and trace residences and movements through census, birth, and other public records. Because I'm not sure if you've noticed, but so far we've traced a path to Ellis Island, New York, United States of America, and Holywell, which is in Flintshire County, Wales, and neither of those places is anywhere near Buckingham Palace. We'll start building our tree after this message from our sponsor. Are you worried about your kids in the summer slide? I'm not talking about water park safety. I'm talking about your kids forgetting things they learned in school when they take an educational break over the summer. Well, Paper Pie has a variety of books and activities to make sure your kids don't careen off in the wrong direction during the next few months. Paper Pie brand partner Amy Barr is as excited about Paper Pie products as I am about genealogy. You may have heard of Usborne Books. Well, Usborne Books is now Paper Pie, and the products go far beyond books and include things like Smart Lab toys, which provide kits for how to make lip balm or building a robot. Find all these amazing products online at x10582.paperpie.com. That's x10582.paperpie.com to go directly to brand partner Amy Barr's Paper Pie page. And thank you, Amy, for sponsoring today's episode. We'll start our journey into the past with a timeline and plot the most easily accessible dates and information. Robert's obituary appeared in a local newspaper not far from where he initially immigrated. It lists his father as H.W., which we know stands for Henry William, lists his sisters as Frances, Eliza, and Miss Nellie, and brothers Thomas, Harry, and E.F., which we know stands for Edwin Fulcher. The obit doesn't list his mother's name. She's just Mrs. H.W. It also says that Robert is the fifth son of H.W., but only lists the names of 4 sons. So as we look into census records in the United Kingdom, we may find the name of an additional son who is older than Robert, or find nothing, as this other son may have died in childbirth or extremely young, as was very common during this time. The obituary also tells us that Robert was born on May 4th, 1878, but I'm hesitant because I see that the immigration date is off by a year, so the birth date may not align with the records. So this brings me to genealogy lesson number 5. Obituaries are a great source of information, but are often written while people are experiencing trauma. Dates can sometimes be off, or information can be omitted, like the name of the 5th brother. I also have a few more timeline dates and locations that are important to my search. From the last episode, I know that Henry Charles Hiscox was the messenger in the Master of the Horse Department in 1854 and 1858, which of course is at Buckingham Palace in London in the southeast of England. The obituary tells me that Robert was born in Malpas, Cheshire County, England, which is 180 miles to the northwest of London. The county of Cheshire borders the county of Flintshire in Wales, where Holywell is located, which is Robert's last residence in the UK in 1902. Census records are available for the United Kingdom from 1841 and every 10 years through 1921. So let's take a look at census records from 1881 in the UK, because that is the first census where Robert Upson would appear. The most likely record is found in Duckington in the county of Cheshire, England. We find a Henry William Hiscox, age 40, who was born in London, residing with his wife Martha, age 30, and 5 children. The children are Edward, age 9, Joseph, age 6, Francis, age 5, Robert, age 4, and Eliza, age 9 months. Also residing in the house is Henry William's father-in-law, Thomas Shaw, and mother-in-law, Jane Shaw. In addition, there are 5 servants residing in the home. 3 of them are domestic servants, and 2 of them are farm laborers. Because the names of these kids don't exactly line up with what we know, we need to do a little bit more research. First, Edward could be the misspelling of Edwin. Joseph could be the 5th son, whose name we didn't know. Francis and Eliza check out. There is a Robert, and he seems about the right age. This says 4. The birth date of 1878 would make him closer to 3, but a birth date off by a year is a margin we can accept. But the other siblings we have identified through the photo and obituary, Miss Nellie, Thomas, and Henry, are missing. The census lists Duckington, Cheshire County, as the birthplace of Robert and the siblings who are listed. Our obituary says that Robert was born in Malpas, Cheshire County, England. Research tells me that Duckington is a small village in Cheshire which lies just 4 1/3 miles from the Welsh border. Malpas is a market town in Cheshire, 8 miles away, and also the post town for Duckington. So if you were mailing a letter to someone in Duckington, it would be addressed to Malpas. So it makes sense that nearly 40 years apart, these names would be used interchangeably. So this looks promising, but there's a special gift in this census record that will help us determine if this is the right family. Maiden names can be difficult to find, and it is impossible to build your tree without them. And sometimes you just get lucky. Thomas and Jane Shaw are listed as Henry William's in-laws on this census record. That means that his wife Martha's maiden name is Shaw. I can confirm that Robert Upson's mother's maiden name was Shaw by looking at his marriage record in Iowa. English marriage records don't include mothers' names at all, but Robert was single when he came through Ellis Island. This research leads us to genealogy lesson number 6. Always look at the actual record. If you are working in a program like Ancestry, the contents of the record will be indexed. That index may have been created by something called OCR, which stands for Optical Character Recognition. So, if someone's handwriting is particularly flouncy, it may be read incorrectly by this AI or by humans. Robert Upson's marriage record to Benedicta Jones was indexed under Robert Ryson instead of Upson, and his mother's maiden name is listed as Shan. But looking at this actual record, it says Upson, not Ryson, and his mother's maiden name looks more like Shaw than Shan. Now that we are confident we have the right family, let's go back to that 1881 census record. Henry William is the farmer of 184 acres and employs 3 laborers. Thomas Shaw, Henry William's father-in-law, is listed as a retired farmer. Let's look for another census record. In 1871, we find Henry W. Hiscox, age 32, residing in Duckington with his wife Martha, age 25, a daughter Mary Ellen, who is 15 months old, and twin sons Henry and Thomas, who are 14 days old. So now we have identified all of the siblings from the photo and obituary and have learned that Henry and Thomas are twins. But for some reason, these three oldest siblings aren't around 10 years later. Again, Henry is the farmer of 184 acres. There are 9 servants, including a nurse, a general servant, a dairymaid, a wagoner's lad, and more. Henry and Martha's ages seem off. They have a different set of children. However, it seems unlikely to be a different family as they are residing in the same residence, which is next door to George Orr in Duckington, who was also their next door neighbor in the 1881 census. That leads us to genealogy lesson number 7. Always check to see who is living next door or on the same street on census records. It sometimes reveals friends or family members that you would otherwise not have located. Let's take a look at 1861, as Henry William Hiscox and Henry Charles Hiscox may be residing in the same place. Henry William would be around 20 years old and could still be living at home. I find a few people named Henry Hiscox, a basket weaver, a soldier. I even find a Henry William Hiscox who married a Martha, but he's 41 and Martha is 40. His kids are named William, John, and George, and they live in a place called Amwell. This Henry wasn't born in London. These are definitely not my people because I built a timeline and I'm cognizant of birthplaces and I've mapped residences. I am able to eliminate them. More about how to deal with these types of frustrations after the break. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I hope these videos appeal to both my family members and those interested in learning more about genealogy. I post timestamps in the description so you can skip to the portions in which you are most interested. If you subscribe and click the notification bell, you'll know each time I upload a video. I hope you enjoy this journey into the past with me. I don't find a census record for either Harry for 1861, but that's okay. I'm giving myself permission to move on. I find what I'm looking for in the 1851 England census. Henry Hiscox and his wife Mary residing at the Royal Mews. He is the messenger for the master of the horse department and has a son named Henry who is 11 years old. Give or take a year, that is the age that my Henry William Hiscox would be in 1851. And there are siblings, Ellen, Edwin, Mary, Thomas, John, and a visitor named Emma Trotman. Those names are very similar to the names of Henry William's children. The younger Henry's birthplace is listed as Middlesex Holborn, which is an area of London. In 1841, the first year of the England census, when Henry William would be about a year old, we find him residing at number 12 New Street Square, St. Bride, Middlesex, with his father Henry and his mother Mary. Henry is just 25 years old, and his occupation is listed as bookseller. This brings us to genealogy lesson number 8. Make note of anyone listed as a visitor. That person may actually be a relative. The census taker may not have been specific when it came to visitors. Before we proclaim victory, let's find 2 more census records. As stated previously, I am unable to find a census record for either Henry Charles or Henry William for 1861. As we know, in 1871 and 1881, Henry William is married to Martha Shaw, farming in Cheshire and raising children. There is a bit of a mystery as to where Miss Nellie, Thomas, and Henry have gone off to in 1881. The twins would be just 10 years old, and Miss Nellie barely 12. In 1871 and 1881, we find Henry Charles and his wife Mary living in the servants' quarters of the Royal Mews in Buckingham Palace while Henry Charles continues his work as the messenger in the Master of the Horse Department. In 1871, 58-year-old Henry Charles and his 62-year-old wife Mary have several adult children residing with them at the Royal Mews, and the children all have occupations like milliner, haberdasher, draper, or wholesale warehouseman. By 1881, some of those children have moved on to make their own homes, and 2 grandchildren have come for a visit. 10-year-old grandsons, Thomas and Henry Hiscox, who were born in Duckington, Cheshire. So now we know why the twin boys were not on the 1881 census at their parents' home. They were visiting their grandparents at the Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace. Who wouldn't love hanging out with Grandpa, as he does something very, very important with the Queen's horses? Join me next week as I delve deeper into the life of my 3 times great-grandfather, Henry Charles Hiscox, his wife, my 3 times great-grandmother, Mary, and their time at Buckingham Palace.